Okay.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Fabia. I'm 21 and I'm an exchange student, as we were just talking about, from the south of England. I'm from a city called Brighton, which is just south of London. And I'm here, as an exchange student, helping to teach English in some of the local schools. And there we go. So I study Spanish back in the UK at university. So that's why I've got this opportunity to come over on the program called the British Council, which is the program that links Argentina with the UK. But I believe the American one is called Fulbright.
Yeah.
And there's also a French one, but I'm guessing most of them are only English teachers. So yeah, Fulbright or British Council, they're the two options that there are for you to go and travel and explore really cool parts of the world.
Yeah, sure. All right. So we're gonna start with let me share the screen with the presentation. So I think today is the last talk that Fabia will be giving, because she's going back to the UK next week. Well, actually, she's traveling a little bit. So she's going to Paraguay, Brazil, and then she's going back to the UK. So this is the last presentation she's going to give. So make the most of it, ask questions, and yeah. And this is, I guess, one of my favorite topics. So Fabia, be my guest.
Okay. Well, I mean, all the other, if you haven't been able to make any of the other ones, I believe they've all been recorded, haven't they?
Yeah, they have.
So they're all uploaded if you want to go and take a look back at any of them. But this one, my last one, I will be talking about my language biography. So growing up speaking different languages. You can probably see there's a French flag on there, so I am half French as well. So my dad is French. So I grew up speaking English and French in the home. And then, so I'll just talk a bit about how my experience was growing up speaking two languages, and then obviously coming to learn Spanish on top of that. If you have any questions throughout, just interrupt me, speak, ask as many as you want, or put them in the chat, and I'll try and answer them as best as possible. Take it away.
All right.
So growing up bilingual. So I have always lived in England, always lived in the south of England, but I've grown up speaking English and French. So my dad is from the north of France, from a city called Rouen, there in the red on the map. And my mum is from the north of England, from a town called Glossop, which is near Manchester, near Sheffield, if you might know where they are. Yes, so my dad has always spoken in French in the house, always. To all of us, I've got two younger sisters as well, and my mum has always spoken in English. But they both speak. My dad speaks English, obviously, and my mum speaks French as well. So we all understand each other. There's not one person left out. If my dad's speaking in French, my mum does know what he's saying, so he has to be careful. So my dad has actually lived in the UK over 25 years, I now want to say. So actually probably longer than he's lived in France. He's more English than French now.
And what about your mom? Your mom, she picked up French while she was there, or she learned it at school?
Yeah, so I think she learned it at school. She did some French for her A-levels, the exams we take at age 18. And then I think she did a history degree at university, but she also did French as credits, which enabled her to go on a year abroad. And that's when she met my dad in France. So they both speak. And my dad didn't really speak that good English. It was mainly Spanish he spoke as well. So my dad just knows a lot of languages, but we all understand each other at home, and both languages are spoken. So growing up, before I went to school, I would speak kind of a mix, I guess, when you're learning languages. To me, that was normal, speaking French or speaking English. But then I started primary school, and obviously then I was, for a full day, I was only exposed to English. You know, my teachers taught me in English, obviously, and all my friends were speaking in English. So I was only really exposed to French, you know, when I got home, when I was with my dad. So up until age 5, I would say I probably spoke 50-50 English and French. But when I started to go to school, English just became easier for me. It was the one that I heard the most. So I would sneakily just try and start replying to my dad in English, because it just became my first language, I guess. Yes.
And how did he feel about that? Did he tell you answer back in French, or he didn't mind you answering in French, in English?
I mean, he doesn't mind. Obviously, he tried and pushed the French. And I always remember, you know, if I wanted a treat, or, you know, could I get an ice cream? He'd be like, "What's that in French?" You know, he would push me to speak in French, especially if it was something that I wanted. But I think, you know, my French family only speak French, really. They don't speak English at all. So my French was kept up, and, you know, I was listening to it every day, and my dad never stopped speaking in French. I knew the French. It was just easier and more. It was a cheat, basically. I just provided.
And as it has to do with your identity, maybe he didn't want you to lose that. He didn't want you to get rusty in French.
Definitely. And you know, we know, weirdly, there's a couple of other French families that we know back home where I live. One other family that we were really close to were the same. The mum was French, the dad was English. And so, you know, if we'd meet up with them, it'd be a whole mix of languages, English and French. But there was also another family that we knew that the dad didn't really push the language. So his daughter grew up mainly speaking English. And I think from a young age, I realized what a waste of an opportunity. So even though I, you know, always spoke in English, I did make the most of having my French dad and, you know, keeping it in the house.
Yeah, and was it just your father speaking, or you also listened to the radio, or she asked you to read some news or something else?
Yeah, so my dad would always read, you know, when I was younger, my dad was always my mum would read to me in English, and my dad would read to me in French. And my dad always had, you know, the French radio on, sometimes even the Spanish radio on. I was like, "You're just showing off, Mum." But yeah, there was always French in my life. You know, it was never, even if I may not have spoken it every day, I was always surrounded by French. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you want to.
Conscious of my parents to do that. Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if you want to ask them something related to this before we move on to the other slide. Something related about related to growing up bilingual.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any of you guys grew up speaking bilingual, or if you learned English very early on in school. I don't know. I'm interested. Or if you speak another language, an indigenous language or foreign language, or
yeah, maybe bilingual. I think indigenous communities would are mainly bilingual because they speak their indigenous languages at home, and they have to learn Spanish. So yeah, I guess they grow up bilingual. But I'm not sure about us. I don't know if anyone grew up bilingual here in the group. But I guess it's just mainly indigenous communities. And there are some bilingual schools here.
Yes, sorry. I started studying English at the age of 10, and because at earlier age it was not available in Villa Angela, where I'm from. I remember my teacher saying that she needed us to write and read properly in Spanish in order to have easier classes for her. But yes, most of us started at the age of 9, 10.
Yeah.
But nowadays, well, it's known that it's not needed to read and write in order to learn a second language. Yeah, but that was like 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So it was quite a time ago.
Yeah. So yeah, we usually start at 8. Yeah. Generally speaking, at 8. Yeah, some kids start earlier on because they go to kindergartens in which another language is spoken. Bilingual schools are usually English, Spanish. There's one here in Resistencia, Italian, Spanish. Well, and in Buenos Aires, you have others like German, Spanish. But yeah, here it's mainly English, right? Okay.
So, I mean, I briefly mentioned this. So speaking wise, I learned to speak English and French at home. And then obviously when you go to school, you learn to read, you learn to write. And that was obviously all in English. My dad, yes, started to read to me in French, and he would have the radio on. And then obviously calling my French grandparents as well, and visiting them in the holidays. That would be where I would really improve my French, I guess. Then, you know, growing up, I knew I wanted to study French properly at some point, because I thought I have this gift, I guess. I have this opportunity, and if I ever want to go abroad, go to France and actually get a job, they're not gonna, you know, if I've never learned the correct grammar rules properly, and you know, that there's going to be people that may not be half French, but they've studied French.
Oh, what happened?
So I kind of realized that I have this opportunity, and I need, you know, I would be silly not to then study properly and to, you know, benefit me in the future. So I started learning French at school at the age of 14. And this was actually very hard. I found this hard because a lot of my classmates had been studying it for a couple of years. And I found it really hard to learn to start sort of learning at age 14. When a teacher would ask me, what's the grammar rule, or why is this correct and why is this not correct? I would find it really hard to find an explanation. You know, someone would say a sentence and I would know orally if it was correct or not correct, but I wouldn't have the understanding as why is it correct? I couldn't tell you. I just know it's either right or wrong. So that I find quite hard. And I mean, still now, studying French, it's difficult pick up a language later, especially when, you know, I've been exposed to it and you think you know, but you don't.
Well, at least you don't know the rules, or you don't know this meta language that we use to speak about language. But yeah, you were fluent and accurate. But yeah, it's not that you don't know, but it's the a part of the language as a system that you don't know how to explain, right?
Yeah, like I know it in my head and I know if it's right or wrong, but yeah, I wouldn't know how to write it necessarily. So
especially French, because it has so many letters that are not pronounced.
Exactly. And in the third person singular and the third person plural, you know, you've got, it sounds exactly the same, but it's written completely differently. So that really threw me off a long time. You know, you say it one way, but you don't know how to write it necessarily as well. So that was hard. In terms of the two languages, I've never really gotten mixed up between the two. They're pretty different languages. So that was never really an issue. However, what is an issue is, you know, I'm speaking to my English friends and I'm trying to say a word and I can't remember the word for the life of me, but I know the word in French. I'm like, the word in French is no use to all my friends, because if I say the word in French, they have no idea what I'm trying to say. Or it happens the other way around. You know, I'm speaking to my French family and I'll know the word that I want to say in English, but the French word isn't coming out. It's just not programming. So that happens quite a lot.
So are there words that are, for example, in my friends and I, we usually have trouble remembering certain words in Spanish because we learned them in English first, and then we struggle to find the word in Spanish. So when your friend speaks English, great, you use the word, but when they don't, it's like, hey, how do you say that? One of them is availability and available, and we struggle to find the word in Spanish every time. I don't know why. Are there certain words or expressions that you usually forget or you usually get mixed up?
Ooh, good question. I would say more in false friends are always an issue. I guess that's a bit more problematic English to Spanish rather than English to French, but they definitely, yeah, false friends always catch me out. I'm just like, is that right? I always double take like sensitive, sensible with Spanish. That's always a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
stuff like that.
as English has many words that come from France,
Yes.
the last French invasion, but they are pronounced differently. So I figure you might have trouble pronouncing them like in English and in Spanish because they are exactly the same word, but pronounced differently.
Yeah, so déjà vu, I don't know what you'd say in Spanish.
Déjà vu. We use the French version of it. Yeah. So,
I mean, you say it more Frenchly with the French pronunciation. So in English, we say déjà vu. And you say that to a French person, they're like, what did you say? And then you go, déjà vu. And they're like, oh, yeah. There's a lot of words that we say very English, but they're actually French words. And what I've actually always found awkward in a way is like food. So croissant. Like your media lunas.
Yeah.
When I'm with my friends, I never know how to pronounce it because growing up, it's always been croissant. It's a French word, and my family are French. We've always said it the French way. But if I'm talking in English and I ask my friends, "Oh, what do you want? Do you want a croissant?" It sounds very, very strange that I'm saying it the French way. So, but it always feels really, really wrong to go croissant.
Yeah.
So that's always been funny. There's words like that where I'm like, oh, I don't want to say it the wrong way, but if I say it the French way, that's weird because I'm speaking in English.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there are so many words. Yeah.
So many.
Like cul-de-sac. What others in French? Entrepreneur.
Yeah. That one I can't ever do either. That's a hard word.
Exactly. All right.
So on top of these two, I then decided it would be a great idea to go and study another language just to confuse myself even more. So again, at roughly the same time that I started learning French, I started learning Spanish. So at the age of 11, it was compulsory to study a language at secondary school, and they just sort you into one. So I could have been put into French, Spanish, or German. I was put into Spanish. I think I actually emailed the school saying, can I not be put into French or something? Because I wanted it to be different. So I started learning a bit of Spanish quite early on. This then I really enjoyed, I think maybe part of it was very egotistical. I picked it up a bit quicker than a lot of my other classmates. I was like, oh, I'm doing really well. Just because it is a very, very similar language to French. You've got similar tenses, similar words, similar rules, similar structures. So already having all this French knowledge, I found it wasn't easy, but it was easier to pick up than someone who only spoke English. And I quickly realized I was like, I like Spanish. I like this language. So I decided to carry it on at the same time that I was learning French, which sometimes was hard. Especially at school when you've got a full day. I would come out of a Spanish class and I'd have to go straight into a French one. And that sometimes was a little bit, it took my brain a bit of getting used to. I just spent 1 hour thinking in Spanish, and then I'd have to go 1 hour thinking in French, and completely change my mindset. So sometimes, there were words that you think are one language, but they're actually the other. So learning them at the same
were
time.
either Spanish or French, right? Or they were English speaking French and Spanish?
Yeah, they were English speaking French and Spanish at my secondary school. Yeah.
Oh, all right.
In secondary schools, we don't have that many native teachers, just because there's a lack of language teachers. as it is. And I think most of them that are native probably end up being more university teachers. So at the moment at university, my French teachers are French and my Spanish teachers are Spanish from Spain. But yeah, so in secondary schools, it's mostly English teachers who have done their degree in whatever language, but they're English usually.
Okay.
However, you know, sometimes I do get confused, but it has been very useful. You know, if I don't know a word in Spanish, usually, not always, but usually I can think of the French word and then either say it with a Spanish accent or just change it ever so slightly, and it will probably be correct. Doesn't always work. Sometimes you try and someone will be like, no, that doesn't work. But there's a lot of words that are very, very similar. So that has been very helpful.
Yeah.
Learning a third language, learning
so
Spanish.
You say a Spanish word in a French accent or vice versa. Yeah, a French word with a Spanish accent, and it sometimes works because they are Romance languages.
Quite often it does work. But there's been times where I've, you know, made it up on the spot and I've just been so totally wrong. But it's always worth a try. It's worth a try. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So speaking of learning in the UK, learning a modern foreign language is compulsory in secondary schools from the ages of, I think I got that wrong, from the year, I think I've written that wrong, from the ages of 11 to 14, that should say.
Okay.
11 to 14. And that's what I said, they'll just allocate you a random language. You know, they'll just try and split it evenly so that every student tries a different language. Most primary schools might offer basic French or Spanish. I did French in my primary school, but the teacher wasn't the best, I would say. You know, I don't know if they have to have any, I don't know, maybe the rules have changed. But I definitely do know that in my class, the French teacher would often come into my class, ask me, my 11-year-old self, you know, how do you say this in French? I'd tell her and then just go back and teach it to the next class, which isn't the best, but most primary schools will teach the basics, you know, hello, my name is, numbers from 1 to 20, colors, to try and give you that. But yeah, no, most language learning starts at age 11 in secondary schools. Some private schools will offer Latin. Not sure why, but yeah, modern foreign languages are the ones that are taught in secondary school. So as I said before, French, Spanish or German, I mean, depends on the school, but they're the main ones. Maybe Italian in some schools, I don't know. And we get assessed through 4 types of exams. So listening exams, speaking exams, reading and writing exams. So if we take any exams, there'll be 3 papers and then 1 oral exam. Yeah, as I said before, most teachers won't be native at this level. Some might be, but they will be qualified teachers. So they will have done a 4-year degree in that language and then their 1-year teacher training degree. So 5 years of experience, basically. So they are all fully qualified. On the right here, there's just, I just found a mock exam question that probably that are taken from the exams that you take at 16 if you take a language. So these are the type of things we get given. I don't know how old this paper is, but this is a writing exam, I believe. So you will have a translation text to do, and you'll also have like a written thing. I'm assuming they're very similar here. You will have the same ones when you learn English. And yeah, so these will
maybe
be based
not
on
translation. Yeah, I'm thinking that translate the text into Spanish and and this is a writing thing.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, the writing part probably it's quite similar to standardized exams, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure we have these kind of exercise of translating a text into English. So this was secondary school, right?
Yes, secondary school. And so this will be a writing, then you'll have reading papers, which will give you a big text in Spanish, and then you'll have questions below to answer. based on how your comprehension, what you've understood from reading the text. Then you'll have listening exams where an audio will be played. And then again, you have questions to answer based on the audio that you've just listened to assess your understanding of the spoken language. So we're assessed in all aspects, I guess,
skills.
of the language. Yeah, all skills. And then again, speaking, you will be assessed separately, you know, one-to-one with your teacher. And yeah, this just depends. So classes, again, are a combination of around 30 students in state schools. Private schools probably have smaller students, maybe 15 per class. And I believe actually between ages 11 to 14, this will be a mix of abilities. So again, you're just put into a language class. So the teacher kind of has, some people will pick it up really quickly. Some people will really be struggling, might not want to learn a language, you know, but we're all in the same class. So that can be quite hard for the teacher, I guess, you know, having to deliver classes to quite a variety of abilities. I believe then once you get to 14 and you can then choose if you want to continue this language, then when you take the exam, it's divided. I think you have a higher paper and a foundation paper. So the students aiming to do better will be put in higher and they'll be in their own class. So that's then a bit easier. You're more all the same level. So yeah, that then becomes a little bit easier. But I remember in my Spanish classes, my teacher would have, you know, we'd all be doing the same activities, but she'd give out different sheets to the different abilities. So yeah, it just depends, I think, on the school, on the exam, all of that. But it can be quite hard for us learning a language in the UK because we don't have that many resources, not that much funding is put into languages, maybe as much as it would be put into science, maths, and English. So it is hard. It is hard for the teachers to try and teach a language efficiently, correctly, but also, you know, they're having to do it to 30 students with all different abilities and all different, I guess.
Different levels, different abilities, different backgrounds.
Yeah, and different, you know, they all have different, a willingness. They all have different willingness to learn.
Exactly. Yeah, we do have this exactly the same situation at state schools. So probably more than 30, depending on the school you teach at. So you might have 40, 43, and it's quite difficult. So you mentioned these exams, these standardized exams. What about the listening comprehension? Is it just the Spanish from Spain, or do you get to listen to other accents as well?
I'm trying to think back when I did mine a long time ago. I think they try and give a variety of accents from all over the world. Maybe at age 16, these exams, they might be Spanish based. And then if you go on to further education at age 18, that might be when they start to change.
Okay.
I think definitely they'll be from different parts of Spain in these exams here at age 16. Just so there's the regional accents within Spain. So obviously the southern Spanish accent is more similar to the accent from here, for example. I think maybe it's just limited to Spain at age 16. If you then take it on after 16, it'll be from all over the world. But I think to try and keep it not as easy as possible, but to try and keep it as simple, maybe. But that might be changed. That could have changed since I did mine. But definitely there'll be differences in regional accents. But it will be, you know, I'm sure you have the same. It'll be like, question 1, listen to blah blah. You know, it's very. It's not the most natural sounding thing.
So here, depending on the textbook you're using or depending on the teacher, you might have access to different accents or just the British one or the American one, or so it's up to the teacher to introduce other kinds of accents. So yeah, it's mainly one or the other.
Yeah.
Okay.
So these exams, the way we're assessed, I said before, with the 4 different exams, and over these 4 exams, you'll have a range of topics that you have to study for. The vocabulary that you have to learn for them is extensive. So I mean, I covered every single one of these topics and more, but these are only a few. So identity and culture, so talking about yourself, your family, where you're from, technology, what you like to do in your free time, hobbies, etc. Customs and traditions, so your own, and then ones from the Spanish, different Spanish customs, and this, you know, this will be from all over the world. Social and global issues, so I remember we did a lot about environment, recycling, unemployment, travel and tourism as well, and then jobs, what you would like to do in the future, what you're studying currently, all of this. So it was a lot of new vocabulary that we were being introduced to, which was really interesting actually, because I think sometimes it's easy to just study the main, you know, maybe your culture, the culture of the language that you're learning, or the different countries of the language you're learning, you know, customs and traditions. But I think it was interesting that we did, you know, social and global issues. You know, I walked in and we were learning how to say like a rubbish bin, recycling, and looking after the environment. I think that was important to learn that as well in a different language.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Nice. Questions so far?
Do you study these topics in school? Do you teach them, I guess, maybe now? I don't know what levels you teach, if you're secondary school teachers or profesorado level. That'd be interesting to know what topics you're taught as well at school.
I have a doubt. You said that in some private schools they teach Latin. Is there any place that they use Latin? I mean, for example, I don't know, at court or something like that?
No, so Latin is a dead language. Officially, it is a dead language, so it's not spoken.
Yeah. Indeed, but I mean, is Latin used in any kind of official, I don't know, a court justice or something like that?
I think there are probably words that might be used in law or in medicine, perhaps. Maybe if you go on to be translator. I mean, it's probably useful as a language student, maybe to know a bit of Latin, maybe. But
yeah,
it's not.
But it is still taught. For example, Nacional Buenos Aires teaches it. So they usually teach this, thinking that it might help you cognitively speaking. I mean,
I think that's more. There might be words used in different sectors, like in law, but to be a lawyer, you do not have to understand Latin. No one has to understand Latin for any job, I believe. Maybe very specific Latin-related jobs, I don't know. But no, it's not. I think it's just a choice, and I think private schools do it because they can. They have the resources maybe, and I mean, I don't know anyone who studies Latin now at university level, I don't think. So it's something I think you can do if you have the money and the resources to say you provide Latin. But most schools focus on modern foreign languages because realistically, if you go traveling, you know, if you're not really bothered about studying a language further, but if you want to go traveling, you'll at least have hopefully some basics in a language that will help you. But yeah, I believe Latin isn't required. And if
how many hours a week are you taught these languages?
I'm trying to think. I think in secondary school I had at least 2 hours of a language per week, probably maybe 4 of each language per 4 hours of a language per week.
Because you don't have like a Spanish language school as we do here. We have lots of language schools everywhere. And you would go to them, but there you don't have a Spanish language school. You study it at school.
We study at school. There might be a few in London or a few private, bilingual schools. But I think honestly they are more common in other countries where they'll have English. I think as a country we're lucky in that a lot of English is seen as one of the main languages spoken. So we don't have as much incentive, I don't think, to have these bilingual schools, which I think is silly. But I think they will exist. There will be some, but they're far and few. They're most if you learn a language, most schools will be in your school. You learn them separately.
Okay. All right. And regarding teaching strategies, would they focus on what is the main focus? You told us about the topics, but did they teach you grammar or functional language speaking? What did they focus on?
Everything. Everything. So here in this writing exercise on the right, they do it specifically, so you can see the second point wants you to talk in the past tense, or in one of the past tenses. In the present, what do you do to protect the environment, and where would you want to live in the future? So these things are all done. We learn a variety of tenses, and to get the most marks, you will have to prove that you can't only just talk in the present, but you can talk about what you did yesterday. You can talk about what you did 5 years ago. You can talk about what you're going to do tomorrow, or what you're going to do, what you might do, to showcase your variety of tenses. Again, in the translation, you've got the present, the very first sentence. Again, the second sentence is already talking in the past tense. And next week, they're one of the last sentences. It will start at 6:30. So we learn grammar. Lots of grammar. We learn tenses, maybe not all the different tenses, because there's loads. I think you have 18 tenses in Spanish. There are 18 different tenses in Spanish, and I think there's only 12 in English. So we won't learn all 18 in secondary school, definitely not. But we've got I've forgotten them now, but you've got the conditional, you've got the simple future, you've got the preterite, you've got the imperfect, and the present. So you've got.
So when you finish at 18, you are able to speak, to hold a conversation, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you should be able to hold a conversation at the age of 16 as well, if you're taking these exams. Otherwise, you will not pass your speaking exam. But yeah, so the speaking exams as well. When I did mine, I don't know if they've changed. So when it was time for my speaking exam, I went into the room. They gave me a photo card, randomized photo card I'd never seen before. And this could be in relation to any of these topics at the bottom here. And I would have, I don't know if it was 5 or 10 minutes to prepare in my head what I was going to say, write notes, but I don't think I could take those notes into the exam. And then I would get asked questions like, what's in the photo? What do you'd have to speak about the photo and what you thought was happening, what you thought it was related to. Following on from that, then the teacher would give you, again, loads of questions on one of these topics randomized. And obviously it was hard going in because you don't know which topic you're going to get given. So you have to remember everything about all of them. But you could get given a topic on the environment, and then the questions your teacher would ask you on the spot. How do you protect the environment? What would you like to see in the future? And so, all these speaking exams would be, I think it would be about 20 minutes in total speaking, maybe a bit longer included with the preparation time of the photo card. And you'd be asked in different tenses and expected to give full sentences in a range of different tenses and use a range of vocabulary to get the best marks, obviously.
Okay. Okay.
So we've got the influence of language and culture on communication. I think going back to more, growing up with a language or even learning it in school, maybe at secondary school level. So obviously when you get taught a language at school, in this case, you're taught the grammatical rules and the vocabulary of a language. However, expressions, nuances, and communication styles are often shaped by cultural factors that you're not necessarily taught or objectively taught in school. So these are not obvious just from learning a language, but from exploring more about how culture affects language. This you might learn maybe through watching films or documentaries in a certain language, or definitely, at least in my case, I've developed this a lot more through living here in Argentina, developing more of the language here since being here. You know, you've got your you know how to speak the language beforehand, but it's actually when you go and live in a certain place when you develop all these added things. So you've got the example here of the cultural iceberg. I don't know if any of you will be familiar with this, but what you get taught in schools, perhaps, you get taught surface culture. So all these things such as food, flags, literature, games, performances, holidays, music, you know, all the stuff that you see in the textbooks, or the stuff that are easy, you know, you type in Argentinian culture online and these things will pop up as the first few things. Then what's harder to learn is the deep culture, the stuff that you don't see necessarily in a school environment. So you've got communication styles, so facial expressions, gestures, you know, touching body language, tone of voice, and then you've got concepts of time, concepts of personal relations. I mean, there you've got notions of leadership, cleanliness, manners, and attitudes towards, you know, different types of people in society, death as well, and approaches to different things as well: religion, problem solving, marriage, raising children and families. So all of that, I think, is something that's a lot harder to acquire, a lot harder to learn about, because, I mean, you can't learn everything in a classroom. And, you know, if you're in secondary school, your lessons are only, what, an hour maybe, and, you know, you're learning to speak the language. That is, you know, that's the basis. But you can't, if you want to take it further, you need to be able to realize that we have this deep culture. In every culture, in every country, we have these things that vary from, not only from person to person. You know, not everyone in Argentina is going to have the same mannerisms, the same gestures, the same attitudes towards families or children or manners, you know, but it's something that you learn more, the more effort, I guess, you put in, you're learning something. I don't know if any of you have experienced this before, you know, learning English, or do you learn about this deep culture in schools? I don't know. What do you guys think?
We don't, but we should. And as teachers of English, English teachers, we should work on these things, because, for example, we work with greetings, and we don't generally work, at least I didn't learn, and I learned the hard way when I was there, about the personal space that is here, personal space, gestures. Some gestures we used here were rude in the UK or in the States. Personal space, I remember the first time I went there, like 30 years ago. I approached them, wanted to kiss them, because my teacher hadn't explained to me that I shouldn't approach them or get near them or touch them. So yeah, I learned it the hard way. That's why I teach those things. Like personal space. If you are abroad, be aware of these things as well. Facial expressions, eye contact. In some cultures, making eye contact is completely rude. So if you're doing business in, I don't know, in Asian languages, you should bear that in mind, that you shouldn't be making eye contact. So these are the things that we should be teaching as well, not only the surface culture, but also the deep culture. For example, giving presents. What do you do when you are given a present? Do you open it right away? What do you do? Is it okay to give a present to someone if you're invited to a party or not? What should you bring? So those things are not only focusing on the surface culture, and not over generalizing. As you said, it varies. So as a culture, we do have some general guidelines that we follow, but then again, we have, for example, here, Argentina, Chaco. If you belong to an indigenous community, it's again different. So we should at least discuss it and include it in our everyday teaching.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I think, it's hard. And I think, again, as you said, Maria, before, you tend, I guess, to learn when you're learning a different language, or a language like English or Spanish, you might learn a lot about Britain or maybe even England, and maybe not so much about Australia. Or for us, we learn, at least grammar wise in the UK, we learn Spanish from Spain. So that, again, in itself, even though I'm learning Spanish grammar, I'm taught Spanish grammar, I came to Argentina and I was like, well, I'm gonna have to change it slightly. I'd never used vos before, and getting used to using ustedes instead of vosotros. Stuff, just the little things like that. It's hard because it's, you try and teach a language one way. And actually, I have a question. I don't know if this might be school dependent, or if on English exams it doesn't matter. But how do you grammatically, how do you teach English? So for example, the word color, do you spell it with a U, or do you just spell it with an O? The American way or the English way? Because I know for me, I had this question. So I've grown up learning grammar the Spanish way from Spain, and I actually asked this to my teachers, because I said to them, I'm going on a year abroad to Argentina. I'm gonna come back with an Argentinian accent, or a Chaqueñan accent anyway, and I'm gonna be confused, because I have one more year when I go back in a few weeks, and I have one more year of studying Spanish. And I said to them, do I have to go back to Spain's way of speaking for my exams, for my written exams? And they said to me, it absolutely does not matter which one you use, because none of them are wrong, as long as you stay consistent. So I can't say vos in one sentence, and then when I'm talking about a group, then use vosotros. So I'm going to have to really concentrate next year. They said, doesn't matter which one you use. I could have gone anywhere and spoken any variety of Spanish. They just say, as long as you're consistent in one, which I think is really going to confuse me next year, I've got to stick to one. But yeah, I'm interested in you guys. Are there strict rules on pronunciation? American English to Australian English to British English, or not? Is it quite relaxed?
Now, I guess at the teacher training college, back in the day, we were taught one variety, and we were asked to speak one of them. Nowadays, I guess it's a bit more flexible, and as long as you're consistent, you can speak either of them. Australian or other accent is rarely taught. I never heard a teacher teaching, I don't know, English is also official in Nigeria, and I don't remember any teacher bringing it up in classes. So I see French teachers teaching different varieties, and they talk about francophonia, but in English, we don't usually do that. I guess teachers either teach American or British. Other accents are not even taught or mentioned, which is not good. And yeah, I don't know. Personally, for me personally, I when I teach spelling, for example, I tell them, well, this is American, this is British, this is you might hear this in Australia, and you might get this one. Teenagers might write it this way, like, for example, because, cause, COs, that. So
yeah, it's hard. It's hard. You obviously can't learn everything all at once. But that's, again, something interesting. You might learn one way, and then you actually realize, hang on, there's so many other different things.
yeah.
So I would say, when you're learning this influence, or when you acquire this influence, for me personally, in learning through French and English, this has been subconscious, and for you guys in speaking Spanish, it would probably be subconscious for you as well, in your native language, or at least maybe taught through family and friends. You taught when you go to school, you learn about your own customs from your country, from your province, your region. But when you're learning a new language, I would say it's been harder, I guess. You know, you need more research. You know, it's not enough just learning what you learn in schools. And you know, teachers have to be more aware of this and more conscious to try and teach this deep culture. So yeah, as I said before, being here has helped me develop it more, my deep culture of Argentina. But again, it's very specific to the experience that I've had here. You know, I couldn't compare it necessarily to someone who's been in Patagonia. You know, again, it's still going to be different, even though technically we're in the same country. So I think it's, as you said, Maya, it's something that we have to try and teach.
And be careful with overgeneralizations, because I heard some students saying, okay, in the States, they eat junk food. Wait, it's not like that. So it might depend on the person, on the city, so wait. No, so we should teach them not to, well, okay, stereotypes are good for learning, but at the very early stage, but then we shouldn't be teaching stereotypes. So it's not that British people do this. No, well, it would depend on how they were brought up, where they are from exactly. Yeah. So,
definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions? Ornella, Andrea, Nicolás, your cameras are off. We feel like we are talking to nobody. Thanks God Ornella has her camera on. Thank you, Ornella, for having your camera on. But the other ones? Lynette, Nati, Ruben, Diana, Marisa. Any questions so far? Okay. Well, no worries. Maybe they are shy. Maybe you can type them in the chat.
My side. Okay.
Okay, Diana, go ahead.
No, well, I'll put my camera on because I don't want to be like some text, random text. Just to say hi here, because I don't really have a good question for this session, but I really appreciate what you were sharing. And I think this is very richful in the way that sharing different way of learnings, and also from different backgrounds. Yes. So thank you very much, and I appreciate this time.
Right, it's my pleasure. No, it's interesting for me as well. You know, I'm you know, teaching parts of my culture, but you know, interacting with you guys and learning how it's different. You know, we are all learning different a second language, but the way that language is taught, and you know, it's different everywhere in the world. So thank you for joining these Zooms and letting me learn as well.
Yeah. So the presentation goes on. Hi there, Nahuel. Ruben is from Britain. Angela. Nahuel, remind me where you're from again. Was it Machagay? No. I know, we can't hear you. Okay. And Marisa? And Diana, I don't know where you're from. I know Andrea is from Machagay.
I'm from Fontana.
Fontana, okay.
Which is very close to Resistencia, the capital city of Chaco. So
nice.
There,
okay.
I work in the school very near here. Like I am actually 2 blocks from the school.
Okay, nice.
With the 7th grade.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. So we will continue with the presentation, but please do interrupt, answer Fabia's questions. The idea is to to talk, not just to give a presentation. All right. Okay.
Yeah. So moving on a little bit. So again, culture within the language. We have so many differences between English, between Spanish. You know, so an example that's quite common, I think, quite difficult when you're first starting a language it's very easy to directly translate, to literally translate from your language. But in requests, we see that as quite a hard thing between English and Spanish. We do have this difference. So generally, requests are seen as more direct in Spanish than they are in English. English, there's a stereotype that we're all very polite, a bit like Canadians, we're very polite. And sometimes it would be seen as rude to ask someone to give us something, as you might say it in Spanish, so give me a coffee and 2 pastries. We would perhaps more say, can I get a coffee? Can I borrow your charger? It's more of a question, expecting them to maybe say no. Whereas in Spanish, it is seen as more direct. Dame un café. It's like give me, but you can't. It's just different, and it's the directness that you need to understand and know the difference. You might be really good at Spanish, and you might be able to translate anything, but culturally you have to know how to translate these things, because if you translate these things literally, it just isn't really correct. I don't know if any of you have had experiences with this or different examples. But yeah, that was always something hard for me and my classmates. We would all do role plays in class. Pretend you're in a restaurant, you and the person, one's the waiter and one's the client, and stuff like that. And yes, there's a few.
Yeah, I'm thinking that in our diseño curricular we have reflexión intercultural. It's one of the things we should be working in class, and sometimes it's just this. It's giving an example of this. So how the culture is within the language. So you wouldn't say, even though it might be grammatically correct, if you say, give me a coffee, it sounds extremely rude. Préstame el cargador. So yeah, in these little things, you can see the culture within the language. So you don't need to prepare a great class in order to have this reflexión intercultural. It's just here, these little examples, like how you see the culture, this politeness in the language. Can I have your name? Can I have your passport? Can I get a coffee? Can I borrow your charger? So these little examples show that the culture is there, right? The same with this.
Yeah, this was an example that I found. They're always talking about this when I, in university as well. Again, active and the passive voice, there's no right or wrong. They're both grammatically correct in both languages, but the passive voice is used way more in English than it is in Spanish, where you perhaps use the active voice a lot more, or the impersonal se is used a lot more. So again, there was just this funny example, the active voice, wild penguins attacked my sister. But in English, it's more common, I guess, more fluid if you were to say my sister was attacked by wild penguins. And again, if you're using that example and then you were to try and translate the passive voice in English into the passive voice in Spanish, it just doesn't sound as natural, doesn't sound as fluent, perhaps. And it's these types of things that, yes, you might know word for word how to translate that, you might grammatically be correct, but it's just knowing these cultural differences, the differences in language uses, what sounds more fluent, what doesn't sound as fluent.
Yeah, Diana, go ahead. Diana has a question.
Yeah, just a little thing here. Well, I totally experienced this from first person. I forgot about everything of my English class when I was first in UK, and totally go for a tea or a coffee, don't remember, and that was the exactly sentence I used. But more often this day, I sometimes feel like contradicted, because sometimes when you try to be like empathetic and try to like really speak as a native speaker, you feel like you are losing your culture, because you are like speaking in a way you don't usually do. And when you are reacting, it's like you have to rethink the way that you are going to express yourself. And of course, in a speaking conversation, this has to be very fast. So sometimes I feel like, well, it's like I know that you are going to understand me better in that way, but sometimes I want to be myself and just speak in the way that I usually do. So that's the contradiction I feel. I don't know if you have felt the same.
No, definitely. And I think what's really hard when learning a language, you can be as grammatically correct as possible. You can be as technically fluent as possible, but expressing yourself in a different language is so unbelievably hard. You'll have jokes from your own culture, your own language, that might just they don't correlate necessarily in your second language. It really is really hard for me anyway, to express yourself in the second language the same way that you would express yourself in your own language, because we do just have these different nuances, these different expressions. Even the most basic little things, they're not always the same. Sarcasm levels are different in different countries, different cultures. So when England, we're a very sarcastic nation. I can say that quite, that we just are. And I know in some countries that sarcasm is just not taken the same way that we would take it back in the UK. So you do have to rethink what how you speak in this different language, or even in the same language. There's quite a common stereotype that English people and Australians are very, very sarcastic, and we share a very similar humor. But this isn't the same humor that's spoken that's had in the United States, for example. That's a very broad statement, but and that's within the same language. We all speak English, but within that we all share different things. And I always used to say, when I was studying in France last year, that I didn't feel as funny in French. I didn't feel like I was as fun of a person when I was speaking French, just because it is so hard to convey yourself, to express yourself in the way that you would in your native language, because it's not always. Sometimes it's more rude in a different language, or it doesn't quite come across. So
sense of humor is a huge thing. I remember an English teacher. She was British, and she taught Spanish in Peru, English in Peru, and she said that she stopped being funny because back in the UK she used lots of sarcasm, and when she was in Peru she wouldn't do that because she would come across as rude. So she said, I stopped being funny, so I'm not funny anymore in this language. Yeah. Nahuel, you were going to ask something. You raised your hand.
I think that my audio works now.
Yes,
because
we can hear you.
Microphone. Okay. Now I was going to talk about an experience, not from me, but a friend that went to the USA, and because of the differences in language uses, because the cultures are different, she went to work as a au pair, and she was working in a playground, no, in a kindergarten. And a girl, like a little girl, was being annoying and noisy, and she asked to her to shut up.
Oh.
But and she didn't perceive as rude, but when she told me that, I was like, how did you say that to a little girl? And the parents got mad, and I was like, y con razón, le dije yo.
No wonder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Shut up.
And I was like, how did you say that to a little girl? Like, it's so rude. But yeah, I was that's all I wanted to add.
Okay, now. Yeah, thank you. Well, here what Diana was saying, it's like in the past when I studied, or maybe some of us studied, we were taught with the native speaker model, and we were supposed to speak as accurate, and we should sound as native speakers. But now there's another way of teaching that it's plurilingual. I'm not sure if I wrote it correctly, intercultural speakers, and it's what Diana said, you speak with your accent, it's your own way of speaking. You don't necessarily need to sound like a native speaker. So this has changed now.
Yes, in the English teaching training career where I'm studying, my teachers told me that you don't have to choose an accent, or you don't have to be all 100% British or American. Like you have to be consistent in your speaking, in your writing, and you can talk.
Yeah.
You can speak whatever accent you want.
Yeah, and be able to communicate. This is the thing.
Yes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
definitely. I mean, I think especially, you know, English and Spanish, they are very different languages, and they use different parts of your, I don't know, your mouth, you know. So I think you can spend as much time as possible, you know, learning a language, but you're never going to sound as fluent, you know, as someone native from that language. Our languages are so different, you know. It's not natural for me as an English speaker to pronounce words with the double R, or you know, speak as rapidly as you do here, you know. Doesn't mean that you won't understand me when I speak in Spanish. I'd like to think I've got a good level of Spanish, and the same with you. I'm understanding all of you now. Do you sound like me? No, but I'm not the British. I don't speak the British way. There is no British way. We all have completely different accents. So I think again, what's changing for the better is that we're focusing more on communication as the most important thing, as apart from learning one accent. I think, yeah, as long as we all understand each other, we're never going to all sound like one person. There's not one Spanish person that we all should sound like. There's not one English person that we should all sound like. You know, we're all different within our own countries, and I think it's silly to try and to force yourself to try and speak like a certain way. You know, as long as you're speaking correctly and clearly, and that anyone can understand, then, you know, I think all of us as language students or language teachers, we appreciate when someone can try and speak our language. I think more so than if they're speaking it the right way. There is no right way. That's what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
So, which language am I? You know, I've spoken about all these different languages, and I got asked this question. Maddie asked me this question, and I think I couldn't give a straight answer. So I think this question does depend on what language I'm more exposed to. When I was studying France, or when I'm with my French family, for example, I tend to think more in French, because there's no point in my head trying to think in English if I'm surrounded by a French environment. And when people are speaking French to me, my brain automatically just, you know, thinks in French. It's the most easy thing to do. Same when I'm in England, you know, English is the first thing that comes to my brain. Spanish a bit less so, because I'm newer to it as a language, you know, I'm still learning it. But again, still, you know, when I'm here, you know, I try and think in Spanish more so. It's just what's around me. Dreaming, I've heard that when you dream in a different language, you're fluent. That's when you know you've done it really well. So when I dream, it is usually in English. I'm not a big dreamer anyway. I don't, you know, some people dream every night. Occasionally it's been in French, but I would say more so maybe when I've been in France, or when I've been surrounded by lots of French. I think, yeah, I'm yet to dream in Spanish. I think the day I dream in Spanish, I will, I don't know, I will be really happy. I'll take that as a sign that I've got there finally. Swearing, again, very interesting. Probably usually in English, as it's just, you know, when you swear, it's a reaction usually. If you injure yourself, or you're cross at something, you're angry, it's usually what comes out of your mouth the quickest. You don't usually have time to think. But it's fun having the choice. And I think actually I've been swearing more, you know, different languages, let's say, based on the country that I'm in. Because again, you know, if I'm surrounded by Spanish, chances are, and I'm surrounded by, you know, chances are I will just come out with a Spanish swear word. It has happened in the last 5 months. And I take that as something to be proud of. You know, I'm like, oh, I have just sworn, but also I swore in Spanish, so I think it's okay.
Wow. You have a wide variety of curse words. to choose from.
Yeah. It's always useful. And, you know, if I'm in France and I want to swear, but I don't want people to know what I'm saying, you know, maybe I can swear in Spanish or swear in English, and chances are most people around me won't know what I've just said. So it is fun having the choice. Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
Question, yeah.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, Nahuel.
I just wanted to add that when I'm with friends, going to buy groceries or stuff like that, and when I see someone pretty, or I'm always with my friends, and they understand English because most of them are studying with me. And when I see someone pretty, I'm like, oh, do you know him? And I was like, but I changed to English in order to no one understand
gossip.
what I'm saying. Yes. And now I'm trying to gossip with my friend because she wants to be more fluent in English, like fluent and understand English in general. So yes, I'm using English a lot now. Yes, and I'm on the last year of the career, so I'm more fluent.
Yeah, that degree. Yeah, gossiping in English is great.
Yes, and when I was in first year, I used a lot of Spanglish. Like we talked with a partner, boludeces, and like we were, oh, can we go to the cantina, or do you know short phrases in order to use English and to practice. And that's what I told to the first year students, second year students, like you have to practice in order to speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. I think gossiping in a different language is one of the most fun things you can do. You know, me and my family at home, you know, growing up in England, we always had that French option. So, you know, if we were out and about and we'd want to say something about someone, you know, we'd switch to French. But you do have to be careful. You know, sometimes I've turned around and go, oh, I've got to be careful here because the person behind me, I've just heard them speak in French and in English. So you do have, maybe not in a big city where there's likely to be loads of different people, but it is one of the fun things. And it's nice to do. I think once you start being able to do that sort of stuff, it gives you a bit of a confidence boost that, you know, it's very easy when you're learning a language to just know how to say, I went to the shops, you know, and tomorrow I'm going somewhere else. But once you can start having these kinds of more gossipy conversations, I think it's more natural. Yeah.
Yeah, and expressions. So Noel, you should be learning some expressions to gossip. Like, have you heard? I've got the juiciest piece of gossip ever. Yeah. Yeah. What was the other one? Rumor has it that.
I heard on the a little birdie told me.
Yeah. Grapevine. Yeah. In Spanish, that one would be me contó un pajarito. I heard it in the grapevine. Yeah, me contó un pajarito that. So yeah, those expressions are really nice to gossip. Okay.
So got to this far, you know, all using different languages, whether this might be one language, 2, 3, 4, if you're a polyglot 5, more than that. So it is interesting. For me, it has been really interesting to learn the differences, see and understand these differences between English, French and Spanish. But again, I've used it to my advantage, you know, being quite similar, especially French and Spanish. There is a lot of crossover. So it's been interesting to see, you know, what words are similar, what structures are similar, and what are maybe differences between the three languages. And yeah, this does just depend. So phrases that, you know, Maria came up with a lot of these actually, but ones that are very similar. For example, in Spanish, el tiempo es oro. In French, le temps c'est l'argent. And in English, time is money. They all mean exactly the same thing. Temps in French is time, argent is money. So you can see there all three, it's the same sort of same phrase, same idiom style. Again, another similar one, más vale tarde que nunca, mieux vaut tard que jamais in French, and better late than never. Again, it means the same thing. So it's really interesting, these more idiomatic expressions that maybe you'd think they're probably different because they don't, time is money. What does that mean? But they are the same in all three. But there are also differences. This one is slightly different. You've got the same. It means the same thing, but literally the words are different. So in Spanish, cuesta un ojo de la cara.
De la cara.
Coûte les yeux de la tête. Yeux is eyes and tête is head, face. So in French and in Spanish, these two are actually similar. They use the same body parts, shall we say. But in English, we say it costs an arm and a leg. All three in all three languages, they mean the same thing. Literally, they mean the same thing. They mean it's really, really expensive. But it's interesting seeing how in French and Spanish, they use the same body parts to convey this expression. But in English, we use a completely different body part. But the expression is the same. It means the same thing. So that's been really interesting. A bit more fun way of learning languages with expressions.
Yeah, because we have a linguistic repertoire, French again. So we should draw from whatever languages they bring to the classroom. So instead of telling them not to speak the languages they've got, using them. Yeah, because they might be similar. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so this was the last slide. But yeah.
Any questions? I hope you've learned something or enjoyed it at least. Don't know if you have any questions, any more examples maybe of expressions that you found that are similar or different.
Make the most of it because it's the last talk. By the way, avisos parroquiales. Wednesday, September the 18th, we are having another talk with someone that will be speaking about teaching English in rural areas with the Embassy of the States. Okay, so someone who is working at the Embassy of the United States. So she will be having a talk on teaching on rural areas. So that might be interesting, and we might have relevo de funciones for that one. So follow us on Instagram. All right. So any questions? Any comments? This is my favorite topic ever. I love this one.
I was interested in knowing if the talks like this were going to be more frequent, because I liked it and I don't know where I can get information about it.
All right, so these programs of language assistance are, well, we have Fabia, but she's leaving next week, so we won't be having her anymore. She's been here since April. Language assistants are supposed to work at the Teacher Training College San Fernando Rey because they are supposed to be working in one place. But from at Dirección de Plurilingüismo, we decided to organize these virtual talks so that other teachers around Chaco could have the same chance. So we won't be having these talks again with Fabia because she's leaving. The language assistant program she's in has finished, or will be finished next week. But we will have some other talks. We usually post it on our Instagram account, Educación Chaco. So you can have information there.
Okay.
Yeah, and all the previous ones that I've given so far, if you've not managed to see them, they are also uploaded. I can't remember the name, Maria.
Somos Futuro.
Yeah,
on YouTube. They are all uploaded there. There have been 5 so far, 5, 6 so far, and they are all recorded. So you can use them in your classes. You can watch them again. this one again.
Okay. Other question that I have is the cultural differences that Fabia found in here in Chaco.
Okay.
Cultural difference. I believe I did one actually. I think there is a if you want to watch a longer version, I did do a talk on this that has been uploaded. But I think the main cultural differences, I mean, perception of time. I mean, we do not have siesta back in England. You can nap if you want to. There's no law against it. But you know, especially my experience here, I know in Buenos Aires it's going to be completely different as a capital city. But having that siesta time in the middle of the day, you know, shops are shut, and then you start your life again at 5 p.m. That's been a very big difference compared to my home life. So that's been a shock, I guess you could say. The cultural difference in people, I think there is a stereotype that British people are very cold, but I think more than that, it's just been the warmth of the people here. You know, people here, in my experience, have been they go above and beyond. You know, it's one thing being nice to someone because they're new and they're foreign, but it's, you know, people have been asking me to do things. They're like, come and do this, you know, inviting me to loads of different things. So I think that's been very nice, a nice experience for me. Food, all the new food that I've been exposed to, mate, you know, all of these things that we don't really have back at home, or, you know, very different. So there's been a lot. And then I guess you've got just the more basic ones like greetings. Again, as Malia said before, we don't really greet people with 2 kisses back home. So getting used to that every time I meet someone new and stuff like that. So there's honestly been a load of different things. But I do have a talk on that. But I would say they are the ones probably that stand out the most. Yeah.
Okay. So guys, okay, thank you. All right, so I do recommend visiting the Campus Global, where you have all the scholarships so that you know which one to apply for. So yeah, so thank you, Fabia. It's the last talk that Fabia will give. Well, maybe when you are back in the UK, we can call you and we can have a chat. Okay, Nati saying I live in Sausalito. All right, nice to see you, Nati. Okay, Sausalito is quite far away from Resistencia, so thank you for joining us. And well, this talk has been recorded, so it will be uploaded in Somos Futuro. Once it finishes converting, I will send it to Somos Futuro so that they upload it, and you will find it there. And okay, and if you have any questions, just tell me at the Dirección de Plurilingüismo, and we will be organizing other talks in English as well. So follow us on Instagram, where you'll get all this information. So thank you, Fabia, again. And well, see you when we see you.
See you when we see you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.